You don't meet the person who breaks you by accident. There's a reason it was not just heartbreak, it was destruction. A collapse that did not just touch your emotions, it shattered your identity. You stopped eating, stopped sleeping. You questioned who you were before them, and who you were without them. And for a moment, it felt like dying. But what if I told you that was the point? What if the person who hurt you the most was never meant to stay, but to interrupt you, to rip apart the version of yourself that could not see clearly, to expose the illusions you were living under, to burn away everything false with the fire of pain? Carl Jung did not believe all pain was pointless. He believed certain people were sent into your life to activate you, not through love, but through loss. Because nothing rewires you faster than heartbreak. Nothing forces reflection like abandonment. And nothing reveals the soul like being broken open. The one who shattered you may have been the first one to show you. You were asleep. And when someone wakes you up that violently, you don't go back to who you were. You can't. This was not just a relationship. It was a rupture. And what came through that rupture was you. You did not lose them by accident. It was not random. It was not bad luck. And it was not just life happening. Something much deeper, more ancient, more deliberate was at work. Because not every relationship enters your life to offer love. Some arrive to deliver a collision. A spiritual disruption so precise that it feels like it was written into your fate. And when it ends, you don't just feel sadness. You feel a cosmic betrayal. It does not make sense. How can something that felt so right, so necessary, so sacred, end like that? Why would the universe place this person in your path, only to rip them away? They were everything. The conversations, the laughter, the connection that felt like it had been waiting lifetimes to be found. You did not just imagine a future, you felt it. And then, it vanished. Like a dream that collapses the moment you wake up, and you are left gasping for answers in the silence. But here's the truth that most people never say out loud. Sometimes the person who enters your life most intensely, with the deepest connection, the strongest pull, the overwhelming sense of fate, is not meant to stay. They are meant to disrupt you, to tear through your patterns, to surface the trauma you have buried for years, to ignite something inside of you that comfort never could. They are not your forever, they are your rupture, and that's why it hurts so much. Because their presence did not just touch your heart, it rewired your nervous system. It rewrote your understanding of love. You did not just love them. You felt chosen by something higher when you were with them. You felt seen, understood, alive, and then they left. Or maybe they stayed, but withdrew, emotionally, spiritually, slowly, until you were holding the relationship on your own, wondering how something so divine became so cold. You tried to fix it. You tried to explain. You begged, maybe silently, maybe in your own head. Please, don't go. Not like this. Not after everything. But they did not hear that version of you. The version that was finally open. Finally ready. And in their absence, something happened. Something you did not expect. The pain did not just sit on the surface. It sank. Deep. Down into the parts of you that had never been touched before. This was not just rejection. It was exposure. Because their departure did not just leave you alone. It left you aware. Aware of how much you depended on them for identity. Aware of how empty you felt without their presence. Aware of how fragile your self-worth had become. And that awareness, though unbearable, was not a curse. It was the first sign of awakening. Jung believed that the universe does not work on logic. It works on symbols, archetypes, cosmic triggers. The people who enter our lives most dramatically often represent something far bigger than themselves. They are carriers of transformation, disguised as lovers, wrapped in romance, delivered through emotional intensity. But their true role? To bring the parts of you that have been sleeping to life. They awaken you, not with kindness, but with the kind of pain that strips you bare, the kind of pain that makes you question everything, that burns the masks, that exposes the wounds, that drags the shadows to the surface and says, look, now you must deal with this, and you have no choice. You don't get to go back to who you were, because once someone touches you at that level, you can't forget, you can't pretend, and maybe you were not meant to. Maybe the loss was not punishment, but purpose, because without them, you never would have looked inward. Without the breakdown, you never would have reached for something higher. Without the heartbreak, you never would have asked the most important question of all: who am I without this person? And that's where it all begins. Not with love, but with loss. Not with completion, but with cracking. They were not the one to heal you. They were the one to reveal what still needed healing. They were the disruption, the flame, the mirror, the myth you had to outgrow. They were never meant to complete you. They were sent to shake you awake. You did not fall in love with them. You fell in love with the part of yourself you saw in them. It sounds cruel, even unfair. But Jung believed that in every relationship, especially the most intense ones, you are not really seeing the other person. You're seeing a projection, a psychic image born from your own unconscious. It begins quietly. You meet someone, and they feel familiar, like you have known them before. They say something, smile a certain way, and suddenly it lights something up inside you that you did not even know was there. That spark, it isn't recognition, it's projection. According to Jung, every man carries within him an image of the anima, the inner feminine. Every woman, an image of the animus, the inner masculine. These figures live in the unconscious. They are shaped by childhood, culture, memory, desire, and they are hungry to complete us. When someone appears who seems to embody our anima or animus, our unconscious reacts like it has found home. Not because they are truly our other half, but because they reflect the parts of us we've never fully owned. You think you have met the one, but really, you have met the mirror. That's why it feels cosmic. That's why it hits so deep. Not because they're perfect, but because they're the perfect symbol. They carry your wounds, they echo your hopes, they awaken desires you thought were buried. And in that projection, you believe you have finally found completion. But projection is not love. It is illusion. And every illusion, no matter how beautiful, must collapse. Jung warned us of this. He said falling in love is always a dangerous moment, because what feels divine is often a distortion, a construction of our unmet needs. You did not see them. You saw what you needed to see. Maybe you were lonely. Maybe you were lost. Maybe your inner child still longed to be rescued, adored, chosen. And so, your unconscious created a savior and poured that image onto them. The problem? They never signed up to be your savior, and they could never live up to the myth you built in your mind. And that's where the heartbreak begins. Not because they betrayed you, but because reality did. The projection fades, the fantasy collapses, and now, for the first time, you are forced to see them. Not as the mirror, but as a human being. Flawed, inconsistent, confusing, real. And in that moment, something inside you breaks. Not just the illusion, but the identity that was attached to it. You realize the person you loved never truly existed. At least, not in the way you imagined. You were not in love with them. You were in love with the version of you they helped you feel. And now, they are gone. And what's left is not just emptiness. It's a terrifying question. Who am I without that projection? This is the beginning of true inner work, because heartbreak, through Jung's lens, is not just emotional pain. It's the collapse of a psychic fantasy. And what's left behind is the raw self. No projections, no illusions, just you. It's painful. It's disorienting. But it's necessary. Because only when the projection dies can the real self begin to emerge. And maybe that's why they came into your life. Not to complete you, but to shatter the illusion of needing to be completed. They were the mirror, and when it cracked, you saw yourself. Not the perfect version, not the romantic one, but the wounded, half-awake, fully human you. And that was the beginning of the real awakening. Certain people don't come into your life to grow with you. They come to fracture you, not slowly, not gently, but like a storm that rips through the center of your identity and leaves nothing standing in its place. And that's not a mistake. That's the medicine. Because pain, real, soul-splitting pain, does something that nothing else can. It cracks the ego. We are taught to fear being broken, to avoid suffering, to protect the little identity we have built, our personality, our stories, our sense of control. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He believed that only through confrontation with the unconscious, often triggered by pain, can the ego begin to soften, to open, to let go of its rigid grip. And that's what they did. Whether they meant to or not, they became the hand that shattered the shell. You did not just lose them. You lost who you thought you were with them. You lost the role you played, the dreams you wrote in their name, the emotional universe that orbited around their presence. And in that collapse, you met the most terrifying version of yourself, the one that was no longer protected by illusion. There's a reason it felt like dying. Because in a very real way, it was. The death of the identity that was based on them. The death of your fantasy. The death of the inner child's hope that someone would come and finally save you. And they did not save you. They shattered you. But maybe that was the only way to save the real you, the part of you buried underneath all the performing, pleasing, and pretending. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." That's what heartbreak does. It forces consciousness. Before the breakup, you were still playing roles, trying to be lovable, agreeable, impressive, easy. You were managing perceptions, maybe even manipulating parts of yourself to fit what you thought they wanted. But when they left, or betrayed you, or drifted away without explanation, they did not just cause pain. They pulled the curtain back. They showed you everything you had hidden from yourself. How much you needed validation, how much you feared abandonment, how deeply you depended on them for identity. And that realization, that raw confrontation with your own wounds, hurts more than the breakup ever could. But it's also where the transformation begins. You see, ego does not crack from inside alone. You can read books, watch lectures, understand theory, but the ego only breaks under pressure, under loss, under grief. And when it finally does, when the mask slips and the story collapses, something ancient and real starts to surface. That's why some people are not meant to complete you. They are meant to expose you, not because they are cruel, not because they are broken, but because their presence was never about harmony. It was about disruption. They were the earthquake, the fire, the hammer that shattered the glass box you did not know you were living in. You begged the universe for clarity, for purpose, for awakening. But awakening rarely comes in peace. It comes with a scream, a goodbye, a silence so sharp it makes you question your existence. And maybe that's why they had to break you, because nothing else would have gotten through. You would not have let go. You would not have looked inward. You would not have questioned your patterns, your projections, your past. You would have kept pretending, but pain does not let you pretend. It demands attention. It strips away denial. It forces rebirth. Think about it. Before them, who were you? Who were you before you cracked? Before the sleepless nights? Before the grief hijacked your nervous system? Before the silence became unbearable? You were still unconscious, still lost in performance, still believing that love was something you had to earn. But they broke that, not through wisdom, but through absence. They did not give you answers, they gave you a void. And in that void, you met your truth. Jung believed that the self, the deep integrated core of who we are, does not emerge until the ego breaks. And the ego does not break politely. It breaks in heartbreak, in betrayal, in ghosting, in goodbyes you never saw coming, in being left with only the sound of your own breath and the echo of your own unmet needs. That's why they had to break you, because pain was the only language your soul had not ignored. And maybe, just maybe, the breakup was not the tragedy. The tragedy was who you had to become to keep that relationship alive. And the blessing was the break. You thought the pain would destroy you, and in a way, it did. But not in the way you feared. It did not destroy your soul. It destroyed your illusion. It did not take away your worth. It took away the version of you that had forgotten it. And what emerged from that wreckage was not weakness. It was awareness. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are by integrating the unconscious. And often, it begins with pain, not just pain from the outside, but pain that reaches into your foundations, into the stories you built your life around, and tears them apart. That's what this loss did. You did not just lose a person. You lost the fantasy that they would save you. You lost the belief that love would complete you. You lost the story that someone else would make the emptiness go away. And when all of that fell away, you were left with something terrifying. Yourself. Unmasked, uncertain, raw, real. And that's where the real transformation began. Because pain, as unbearable as it is also the only thing powerful enough to bring your shadow to the surface. All the insecurity, all the need, all the unhealed wounds from childhood. They don't show themselves when life is easy. They only rise in moments like this, when love is gone and silence is loud. That silence, that's your initiation. Jung believed that the self, the integrated, awakened version of you, can only emerge when the false self dissolves. And the false self is built on comfort, roles, approval, protection. But when someone breaks your heart, you can't rely on those things anymore. They all fall apart. And what you are left with is something ancient, something sacred, something real. You start to see the breakup not as an end, but as an alchemical event, a spiritual combustion that burned through everything unreal. Because spiritual alchemy is not about gold or metals. It's about using the fire of suffering to transform the self. You suffered, you broke, you collapsed, and slowly you began to rise, not as the person who was desperate to be loved, not as the person who needed to be chosen, but as someone who could sit in the silence, hold the pain, and still not abandon themselves. That's awakening, not bliss, not perfection, but the clarity to stay conscious even when it hurts. And you start to see them differently too, the one who broke you. You stop hating them. You stop needing closure. You stop replaying the what ifs, not because they made it right, but because you no longer need them to. Their role is complete. They were the flame, the trigger, the disruption that cracked your shell and let the light in. They were never your destiny. They were your doorway. And now, you have walked through it. You begin to understand that the pain didn't end your life. It redirected it. It shattered your illusion so you could rebuild your truth. It took everything false so that what's real could finally emerge. You don't forget them. You don't erase the memories. But they lose their grip. Their myth collapses. And in its place stands something stronger than fantasy. Yourself. The kind of self that does not chase, that does not beg, that does not break at rejection. The kind of self that can hold pain without losing purpose. You become whole, not because someone gave you wholeness, but because you discovered it beneath the wreckage of a love that was never meant to last. That's the paradox, the loss that felt like death. It was actually the beginning of your life. The one who broke you was the same one who revealed you, not through their presence, but through their absence. Because only when the mirror shattered could you finally stop searching outside yourself for a reflection that was never real. And in that stillness, in that sacred loneliness, you awakened, not because someone saved you, but because you finally met yourself. And this time, you did not look away. You were not abandoned. You were activated. They did not leave you behind. They left you with yourself. And maybe that's the most powerful thing anyone could ever do for you. Because what felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like being unloved was the beginning of you learning how to love yourself without needing to be chosen first. You thought you were shattered, but in truth, you were revealed. The grief was not the end. It was the reminder that you had been asleep, that your life had been small, that you had placed your worth in someone else's hands and called that love. And when they left, so did the illusion. They were never yours to keep. They were never the solution. They were the spark, the fire sent to burn away everything false. You thought you needed them. But what you really needed was the awakening their absence created. And now, you are not the same. You no longer see love as something to chase. You no longer see pain as something to avoid. You no longer fear the silence, because now you understand that silence speaks louder than any promise. That heartbreak, as brutal as it felt, was sacred. It stripped you, emptied you, and in that emptiness, you found clarity. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's what you have done. You did not run from the dark. You walked through it, and you faced every ghost, every echo, every unmet need, every childhood wound. And still, you stayed. That's strength, that's self-possession. That's the beginning of real love, not the kind that begs, pleads, or breaks itself for attention, but the kind that grows from within and shines quietly. So, if you are still hurting, if you are still waking up at night, thinking of them, If part of you still wonders if it was your fault, if you should have done something different, if you will ever find someone who sees you again, just remember this. They were not the destination. They were the disruption. And this version of you, this grounded, self-aware, emotionally honest version, could not have existed without that break. Sometimes the universe sends you someone not to give you love, but to teach you how to stop betraying yourself for it. And when the lesson is complete, they vanish. But you remain, awake, clear, free. Because now, you don't need someone else to complete the sentence. You are the sentence. You are the full stop. You are the end of your own seeking. They did not break you, they broke the shell. And what came out was the self you were always meant to become. If this message found you at the right time, if it reminded you of your worth, if it helped you understand your pain differently, then subscribe to Psyphos for more psychological truths, soul-deep philosophy, and the kind of storytelling that helps you put yourself back together, piece by piece, mindfully. Because awakening is not something you do once. It's something you choose again and again.